They mocked the janitor, until she fired the CEO in the middle of the boardroom meeting. Who could have guessed that the woman quietly cleaning the hallways every day, the one constantly disrespected, mocked, and almost invisible to everyone, would be the one holding the power to decide the fate of an entire corporation? Evelyn, a janitor who seemed insignificant and voiceless at Hawthorne and Beck, had silently prepared a plan that would leave the entire leadership and the CEO speechless in the midst of the most important meeting. Her story is a living testament to this. Never underestimate ordinary people, for they may be the ones who change the world. Evelyn, a woman in her 40s, quietly entered each morning through the unnoticed side door. In her dark blue janitor uniform, she pushed a cart full of cleaning supplies, moving through the vast hallways as silently as a shadow. Evelyn's face was kind, marked with deep wrinkles, signs of time, but always held a strange calmness. Her eyes seemed untouched by the harsh words or indifference she endured. To the employees and executives of Hawthorne and Beck, Evelyn was nothing more than a piece of decor. She had no name, simply referred to as the janitor, the cleaning lady, an invisible presence among the sharp suits and polished leather shoes. Many times she stood next to the conference table, patiently waiting for the long discussions to end so she could start her work. But no one ever spared her a glance. No one cared about the presence of a silent worker. Evelyn was accustomed to the whispers and malicious jokes from her colleagues about her. Sometimes someone would sneer, "Look at her, standing there doing nothing." She heard it all, but Evelyn only responded with absolute silence. She knew that reacting would only please them further. For Evelyn, patience was always her greatest strength, and invisibility was the sharpest weapon she had in her hands. But what Evelyn kept hidden inside, no one could have guessed. Behind her humble appearance, beneath the faded uniform, Evelyn harbored a secret that could shake this proud building to its very foundation. For many years, Evelyn had quietly observed every person, every story, every dark corner of this company, waiting for the right moment to step out of the shadows and confront those who had once looked down on her. And that day was coming very soon. Behind the invisibility that Evelyn had grown accustomed to every day was a clear perspective on the truth within Hawthorne and Beck, something that the outside eyes, the prestigious clients, and ambitious investors could never see. The company was renowned as a symbol of power in the Dallas economy, with its towering skyscraper proudly featured on the covers of prestigious magazines. But Evelyn knew better than anyone else. The luxurious glass facade reflecting the blue sky was hiding heavy, dark corners. Every day, she silently passed through hidden meeting rooms, witnessing countless tense debates filled with shouting, blaming, and even biting sarcasm thrown out without hesitation. The newly hired employees, initially full of hope and enthusiasm, quickly realized one thing. At Hawthorne and Beck, only the most greedy, cunning, and ruthless could survive. The higher up the power hierarchy, the more evident the coldness and selfishness became. Evelyn vividly remembered the faces of employees who were once diligent and eager, but because they refused to flatter or exploit others, they were quickly pushed aside, sinking into the harsh gears of their careers. The good-natured and honest became easy targets for the schemers. One small mistake, and they were immediately cast aside, replaced by those willing to trample over anything to grab power. But the person who particularly caught Evelyn's attention and whom she was most wary of was Alan Greaves, the CEO of the company. Alan was the perfect symbol of that toxic culture. With his tall figure, polished appearance, and cold, indifferent gaze, Alan knew how to control a crowd with a perfect combination of authority and fear. Every time Alan entered a room, the noise would immediately vanish, replaced by a suffocating silence, with no one daring to speak until he did. Alan was famous for being cold-hearted, always putting his own interests and numbers above everything else. Evelyn had witnessed firsthand a middle-aged secretary, who had been with the company for years, break down in the hallway after hearing Alan's contemptuous words in the meeting room. Why is she still here? If she's not creating value, she should retire. Evelyn saw in her eyes the pain, despair, and deep sense of betrayal. For Alan, indifference went beyond harsh words. Evelyn had witnessed the dirty tricks happening behind closed doors, financial records being tampered with, profit reports blatantly inflated, and honest employees who dared to speak out suddenly disappearing without a word of explanation. Every mistake was blamed on those unable to defend themselves, all to protect Alan's reputation and the close-knit leadership team around him. Evelyn could never forget the desperate look in the eyes of a young employee who nervously told her that he was about to be fired just for daring to question one of Alan's questionable decisions. Just a few days later, the young man vanished from the company, his name never mentioned again, as if he had never existed. Each day, in that stifling environment, Evelyn felt the weight of those secrets pressing down on her more and more. She understood that the toxic culture had sunk deep into every layer of people, every shiny desk, and every hidden meeting room. Hawthorne and Beck, once a symbol of pride for Dallas, was actually a magnificent yet hollow fortress, built on a foundation of selfishness, greed, and indifference toward the very people who had helped create it. And more than anyone, Evelyn was fully aware that it was she, the seemingly invisible woman with no voice, who would have to be the one to bring all of this into the light. That moment, for Evelyn, was no longer far away. In the midst of the darkness that Evelyn silently witnessed every day, the most prominent figure was always that of Alan Greaves. He was the one all employees at Hawthorne and Beck feared, a living symbol of coldness, power, and ruthlessness. Alan did not run the company with empathy or true leadership, but through the deep fear he instilled in every heart within the company. Each morning, Alan entered the office in a perfect suit, his hair slicked back, and a face always marked with an intimidating seriousness. His cold, sharp gaze scanned the office as if searching for mistakes to criticize. The moment Alan appeared, conversations and laughter immediately ceased. Employees hurriedly lowered their heads, pretending to be busy with work, their hearts pounding every time Alan paused by someone's desk, even if just for a few seconds. What truly made Alan terrifying was not just his strictness, but the way he used words as a weapon to crush the self-esteem of his employees. Evelyn could never forget the scene from not long ago when Alan entered the meeting room and suddenly slammed a folder down onto the table. His voice echoed like thunder, each word cutting through the air sharply. "This is shameful. Who made these numbers? I've warned you all many times. Either be better or disappear from here. This company has no room for incompetence." The young woman presenting at the time stood frozen, her face red, trembling to the point that she dropped the papers in her hands. Evelyn stood just outside the glass door, witnessing it all. She could clearly see the icy expression on Alan's face as he pointed directly at the girl, his tone cold and biting. "You've not only wasted my time, but the company's as well. Pack your things and leave immediately." No one dared to speak up. Everyone just lowered their heads in silence, fearing they would be the next target. The words Alan spoke had the power to not only fire someone, but also to shatter the self-worth of anyone standing before him. Evelyn had seen Alan use his personal power to destroy a longtime employee, simply because that person dared to disagree with him in an important meeting. The very next day, the employee's office was cleared out, as if the person had never existed. The most terrifying part was that Alan didn't need any legitimate reason to eliminate those he didn't like. Once, just because he was annoyed that a young employee walked past him in the hallway without bowing fast enough. Alan immediately called the HR manager and coldly said, "Find a way to get him out of the company. I don't want to see his face again." Stories like this had become too familiar, too normal at Hawthorne and Beck. Alan treated his employees as pawns on his power chessboard, easily replaceable, easily discarded, as long as his own interests and position were preserved. Evelyn had even overheard Alan saying in a private meeting with his close leadership team, his voice as indifferent as it was chilling, "Employees are just resources to be exploited. Once they lose value, replace them. It's that simple. You all need to remember, profit is everything. Ethics, humanity, that's just hollow talk used by failures to console themselves." Each of those words etched themselves into Evelyn's mind. Alan was not just indifferent. He was utterly confident in his power and his ability to manipulate. But what he never knew was that, among the crowd of people trembling at his feet, there was one invisible woman who silently observed, quietly recording all the mistakes he was making. Alan Greaves had built his empire on a foundation of fear and ruthlessness. He believed he was untouchable. But Evelyn knew that every power has its limits, and the day when Alan would have to pay for all he had caused was no longer far off. With just a little more patience, the invisible woman would be ready to step out of the shadows, to confront Alan with the very truth he had always despised and denied. The more Evelyn witnessed Alan's tyrannical power at work, the more deeply she felt the invisible wounds her colleagues endured every day. Workers like her were already looked down upon, but under Alan's harsh rule, their lives became even more suffocating and humiliating than ever before. Every morning, Evelyn saw her coworkers bow their heads as they quietly cleaned every corner of the office, full of anxiety and fear. A small speck of dust on the glass, a coffee cup left on a desk, or even just a little water spilled on the floor was enough to earn them harsh reprimands from Alan or his close associates. She vividly remembered one rainy afternoon when her coworker, a small woman named Maria, trembled and broke down in tears in the break room, simply because Alan had shouted at her for leaving a few drops of water on a precious wooden conference table. At that moment, Alan coldly pointed a finger at Maria, his voice booming as though it pierced through every layer of glass. "Do you think this is your home? That you can clean carelessly like this? If it happens again, don't even think about stepping foot in this building." Alan's words not only broke Maria's heart, but they left a deep scar in Evelyn's as well. She understood that it wasn't just a critique of work, it was an act of humiliation, a display of utter disregard for human dignity. On another occasion, Evelyn herself had to directly bear the brunt of that cold indifference. While cleaning the main lobby, she heard the sound of a coffee cup crashing to the floor right in front of Alan's office. A young intern stood there trembling, horrified as coffee spilled across the floor. Alan stepped out, his face twisted in anger, and without even glancing at the intern, he immediately directed his cold gaze toward Evelyn, giving a command dripping with contempt. "Evelyn, come clean this up. How could you let everything get so messy?" His voice made Evelyn feel a sharp pain deep within her heart, but she didn't respond. She simply walked over, bent down, and cleaned as though it were her fault. In Alan's eyes, and in the eyes of everyone around her, Evelyn knew they only saw her as a servant, someone unworthy of even the slightest respect. Those moments would never fade from Evelyn's mind. On the contrary, they became sharper with time, like small wounds that slowly built up into a great pain. Each cold word, each contemptuous glance from Alan and others felt like sharp shards cutting deeply into her self-respect and the dignity of her fellow workers. But from those silent pains, Evelyn found within herself a strange strength, a resolve she never thought she had. Evelyn realized that if she continued to silently endure, the injustices would go on forever. She knew her fellow janitors were powerless to fight against Alan, and she had long been considered invisible. But Evelyn quietly made a decision. The wounds and tears of today would fuel her to carry out her plan. A plan that no one at Hawthorne and Beck, not even the powerful Alan Greaves, could foresee. The time for Evelyn to step out of the shadows was fast approaching, and when that time came, the silent pain she had borne would become a fire that would burn away Alan's arrogance and ruthlessness forever. The seemingly small wounds, day after day, accumulated in Evelyn's heart, gradually urging her to prepare a plan that no one could ever imagine. Because, in reality, Evelyn was not just an ordinary janitor as everyone thought. Behind her quiet, gentle exterior was a secret that, if revealed, could shake Hawthorne and Beck to its very foundation. Evelyn had never imagined she would step into the world of schemes, power, and profit that dominated this company. But fate had arranged for her to become more deeply involved with it than anyone could have ever imagined. Her late husband, Martin, a silent, sharp investor, had seen the potential of Hawthorne and Beck from the very beginning, when it was still a small, unknown company. Martin decided to invest a considerable sum in exchange for a significant amount of shares, and over the years those shares had silently grown, becoming a massive asset that he left to Evelyn upon his death. Evelyn still remembered the day she received the news from the lawyer, informing her that she had become the largest shareholder in the company. At that moment she was stunned, even a little fearful. The woman who had never known anything about the market, about corporate power, now held in her hands the power to influence the entire future of a large corporation. At first, Evelyn considered selling all her shares to live a peaceful life, far away from trouble. But as the injustices became more apparent before her eyes, Evelyn gradually realized that those shares were the opportunity, the power she needed to protect the vulnerable, to correct the wrongs that had been ignored for so long. For all this time, Evelyn kept this secret absolutely hidden. No one in the company, from the lowest employees to the powerful Alan Greaves, could suspect that the woman they frequently looked down on, the silent janitor they regarded with indifference, was holding the power to decide the fate of the company. Evelyn had cleverly used her invisible advantage to quietly gather evidence, discreetly observing secret meetings, shady transactions, and wrong decisions made in the dark. In particular, Evelyn always remembered Alan's face every time he declared his ruthless decisions, completely confident in his invulnerability. Alan never suspected that, just a few steps away from him, an invisible woman was calmly recording every detail, every mistake, and waiting for the right moment to bring it all to light. Evelyn was in no rush. She knew that such a great secret required absolute patience and caution. Every evening, after returning to her small apartment, Evelyn sat at her desk, carefully organizing the evidence she had gathered, step by step, finalizing a detailed plan to expose everything. Now, looking back on all the pain and humiliation she and her colleagues had suffered, Evelyn knew the time to act was near. The earth-shattering secret she had been keeping would soon be revealed, and when that moment came, Alan Greaves and all those who had looked down on her would have to face the consequences of the mistakes they had made. Evelyn, the invisible woman from years ago, was now ready to step into the light. Not as a despised janitor, but as the one who held the future of Hawthorne and Beck in the palm of her hand. It is from the powerful secret that Evelyn holds she constantly reminds herself to be patient and calm. She once thought she would wait a little longer, observe a bit more, so the evidence she had gathered would be more complete, more certain. But one evening, all her patience completely ran out when Evelyn accidentally overheard a conversation she would never forget. That night, Evelyn was still busy cleaning the hallway leading to the executive boardroom. When she was about to leave, the voices of two men suddenly rang out from behind a half-closed door, clear and mocking. It was Michael and Stephen, two of Alan Greaves' most loyal managers, who prided themselves on their powerful positions within the company. Evelyn stopped and accidentally overheard every word they said. "You know, Stephen. The people who were fired today thought they were so important to the company. They were crying and begging as if the world was ending." Stephen laughed scornfully, full of disdain. "They don't get it, Michael. This company is only for those ruthless enough to make it far. As for those weak, emotional people, they can go home and cry with their families. We don't have time for their foolish dreams." Those words struck Evelyn like a sharp knife to her heart. She stood silently, her hand gripping the mop so tightly that her knuckles turned white, every word from the two men making her feel as though her heart was breaking. Evelyn thought about the familiar faces of her colleagues, the ones who had cried silently when they lost their jobs, about Maria, who had trembled in tears when Alan scolded her, and she felt the anger rising uncontrollably. Michael continued, his voice filled with self-satisfaction. "If Alan decides to fire a few more dozen people tomorrow, you and I won't lose anything. We'll just hire new people, pay them less, and the work will keep running as usual." Stephen laughed in agreement, without a hint of guilt. "Exactly, Michael. Humanity means nothing in this job. Alan taught us very well, profit is everything, and people are just easy to replace." Their words echoed in Evelyn's mind, awakening a pain that had been dormant for a long time. She felt she could no longer stay silent, no longer bear watching her beloved colleagues being humiliated and trampled on so ruthlessly. That moment was the tipping point Evelyn had been waiting for, the moment she realized that her silence was what allowed people like Alan and his cronies to become more ruthless and indifferent. That night, back in her small apartment, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk, her eyes focused on the notes and documents she had secretly gathered over a long period of time. Evelyn knew that the upcoming battle would be fierce, and Alan and his cronies would not easily accept this truth. But now there was no fear in her heart, only determination and unwavering resolve. She took a deep breath, picked up her pen, and wrote down every clear step for her plan. Evelyn knew exactly what she was facing, but she also understood better than ever that she had to act now. Because from the moment she heard those inhuman words of mockery, Evelyn knew she had no other choice. She had to rise and fight, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been hurt by Alan Greaves' tyrannical power. The invisible woman from years ago was now ready to make those who had always looked down on her regret it, because they were about to witness something none of them had ever imagined. Evelyn's explosive secret would no longer be kept hidden, and Alan Greaves, along with his entire power structure, would have to pay for all the wrongs they had done. As soon as that night passed, Evelyn knew that time no longer supported her silence. The secret plan she had been nurturing for so long now had to be executed immediately. Evelyn decided to fully exploit her greatest advantage, the one she had held for all these years: her invisibility in the eyes of Alan Greaves and his inner circle. From that day forward, every step Evelyn took along the gleaming halls of Hawthorne and Beck became heavy with tension and purpose. No longer was she merely cleaning or keeping the office tidy. Now, Evelyn had to quietly observe every small action of the powerful people around her, carefully listening to what seemed like insignificant conversations, but were, in fact, full of hidden meanings. Discreetly and skillfully, Evelyn recorded the wrongdoings of Alan and his trusted leaders. She quickly realized that each evening, when the leaders hurriedly left after late meetings, they often forgot important documents on their desks, papers that seemed harmless but were actually the key to exposing all the wrongdoings behind the scenes. One evening, as the building settled into silence, Evelyn entered Stephen's office. Her heart raced, and her hand trembled slightly as she carefully pulled out a file marked Top Secret from among the piles of paperwork. She flipped through the pages quickly, her eyes sharp as she memorized unusual figures, forged signatures, and suspicious transactions that Stephen and Alan had been carrying out secretly for months. Evelyn snapped pictures of each page, then carefully replaced the file exactly as it was, as if it had never been touched. In the following days, Evelyn continued to repeat this dangerous task in other offices. Michael, Stephen, and even Alan, one by one, she gathered every small piece of evidence, slowly building a trove of documents that would completely dismantle the perfect facade that Alan and his associates had so carefully built. Evelyn always knew how dangerous her actions were. One small mistake, a tiny noise, or a fleeting suspicious glance, and everything she had worked for could collapse in an instant. One time, while quickly flipping through documents on Alan's desk late at night, Evelyn froze as she heard footsteps coming from the hallway. Her heart nearly stopped. She immediately set the papers back, retreating quickly into the dark corner of the room, holding her breath. Outside, Alan's footsteps grew louder, measured and steady, accompanied by his frustrated voice echoing through the phone. "Just do it my way. If anyone dares to doubt, I'll handle it. Don't forget who really holds the power here." As Alan passed by the office, Evelyn didn't dare to breathe loudly. Alan's cold eyes glanced into the room for a split second before he continued walking, unaware that Evelyn stood in the shadows, just a few meters away. When the sound of his footsteps finally faded, Evelyn slowly stepped out, her back soaked with cold sweat, her breath coming in sharp gasps from the overwhelming tension. But in that dangerous moment, Evelyn became even more aware that she couldn't stop now, nor could she retreat. She had come too far to turn back. Alan and his accomplices were becoming bolder and more ruthless than ever before, and Evelyn understood that only she had the power to bring the truth to light. After each tense encounter, Evelyn would return home in the dark, quietly organizing the evidence she had gathered, each document carefully marked and clearly categorized. She knew that she wasn't just holding pieces of evidence. She was holding justice for all those who had suffered from the injustice and ruthlessness at Hawthorne and Beck. The day when Evelyn would make Alan Greaves and all those who had looked down on her pay for their wrongdoings was drawing near. The secret plan she executed with such risk and tension every day was slowly coming together. And when that moment arrived, all those who had mocked and ridiculed her would witness the inevitable collapse. The invisible woman of the past was now ready to emerge and do what no one at Hawthorne and Beck ever thought possible. Evelyn's bold plan was becoming more refined, but she knew that she could not take on Alan Greaves' entire power structure on her own. The evidence she had gathered was strong, but to bring down a cunning figure like Alan at the upcoming shareholder meeting, Evelyn needed support from those who truly understood how to navigate this complex world of power. That night, Evelyn sat silently at her desk in her small apartment, the soft light casting shadows over the stacks of files she had meticulously organized. She took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and began reaching out to those she trusted. Unexpected allies from outside the company, people who had either witnessed or even fallen victim to Alan and the system he had built. Her first call was to Robert Jenkins, a sharp lawyer known for his unwavering commitment to justice and his refusal to back down in the face of wrongdoing. Robert had been closely connected with Evelyn's late husband when he was still alive. He immediately agreed, his voice calm and resolute. "Evelyn, you finally decided to step out of the shadows. I've been waiting for this call for a long time. I'll stand by your side until the end." After Robert, Evelyn reached out to Claire Evans, a reputable financial expert who had been quietly monitoring Hawthorne and Beck's suspicious activities for years. Claire didn't hesitate to agree to help, her voice firm. "We have enough evidence to ensure Alan has no way out. I'll make sure all the suspicious financials are clearly presented at the shareholder meeting." Not stopping there, Evelyn also sought help from former employees who had been unjustly treated by Alan and his leadership team. She reached out to Jacob Miller, a mid-level manager who had been unfairly fired for speaking out against Alan in a previous meeting. When Evelyn asked him, Jacob was silent for a few seconds before responding, his voice thick with emotion. "I used to think justice would never come for people like us. But now I believe we have a chance to change that. I'll join you, Evelyn." These consecutive calls formed a strong and determined alliance, each member bringing their own personal reasons and passions for standing up against Alan. They began to meet discreetly at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, far from Alan and his associates' watchful eyes. Each time they met, Evelyn provided more evidence she had collected, while Robert and Claire guided her in crafting a sharp strategy to expose all of Alan's wrongdoings at the upcoming shareholder meeting. Jacob and the other former employees shared additional stories and vivid evidence of Alan's cruelty and immorality, helping to strengthen the plan. Through these discussions, Evelyn realized something important. Alan wasn't as strong as he always portrayed himself to be. His cruelty and autocracy were actually just a facade to hide a deep-seated fear of losing his power and position. That was the vulnerability Evelyn and her allies decided to exploit. Their plan became more and more flawless, each step carefully calculated so that Alan and his accomplices wouldn't have time to react. Evelyn, once an invisible woman, had now become the leader of a quiet but powerful war against the injustice and autocracy of Alan. As the shareholder meeting approached, Evelyn felt the weight of pressure bearing down on her more than ever before. But she was no longer afraid, for the first time in her life, she deeply felt the power of unity, of trust, and of the unexpected allies who stood by her side. Evelyn knew the upcoming battle would not be easy, but she also had complete faith in the plan they had developed, in every step they had carefully prepared. When the decisive day arrived, Alan Greaves and all of his co-conspirators would never have guessed that the woman they had always considered invisible was now ready to face them head-on and make them accountable for all the harm they had caused. The secret meetings with her allies gave Evelyn strength and confidence, but the closer she got to the shareholder meeting, the more she felt the invisible weight of responsibility bearing down on her shoulders, clearer than ever before. Every morning she woke up, Evelyn reminded herself that the battle she was about to fight wasn't just against Alan, but also to bring justice to all those who had been hurt by the cruel system he had created. Evelyn spent hours standing in front of the mirror in her small room, carefully practicing the words she would use in the upcoming shareholder meeting. Every sentence was chosen with precision, every piece of evidence meticulously organized and convincing. Evelyn understood that even the smallest mistake, a moment of uncertainty, and Alan would immediately take advantage to reverse the situation and extinguish all the hope she had nurtured. Meanwhile, Alan Greaves and the senior leadership remained completely unaware of the storm approaching. They continued confidently holding strategy meetings on the top floor of the building, discussing profits and the latest round of layoffs, completely indifferent to the moral and human consequences behind these decisions. Alan even boldly declared in a meeting before the board of directors, We are the winners in this game. Those who want to stay need to learn to adapt. If not, line up for the severance papers. Evelyn, who was silently cleaning behind the glass door, overheard every chilling word. She clenched her fists around the mop, trying to stay calm and reminding herself that the day Alan would have to face all the wrongdoings he had committed was fast approaching. With only a few days left until the crucial shareholder meeting, Evelyn received a call from Robert Jenkins, her attorney and ally. Robert informed her that Alan was aggressively lobbying other major shareholders to secure their votes in the upcoming meeting. Alan seemed to sense a looming threat, but he still hadn't realized that Evelyn, the invisible woman he frequently dismissed, was the one who posed the greatest danger to him. As the day of judgment drew near, Evelyn grew more cautious with every move she made within the company. She tried to maintain a calm demeanor, continuing her work quietly and discreetly, avoiding any scrutinizing eyes. But inside, she couldn't stop thinking about the possible scenarios, repeating in her mind every step of her plan, and the counter-arguments Alan might use to strike back. One evening, just 2 days before the shareholder meeting, Evelyn unexpectedly received a call from Jacob Miller, former manager who had been fired by Alan. Jacob's voice was filled with concern. "Evelyn, I just got news that Alan is trying to recover or destroy some crucial documents before the meeting. You have to be very careful. If he finds out you have the evidence, you'll be in danger." Evelyn took a deep breath, her heart racing, but her voice remained steady as she responded. "Thank you, Jacob. I understand Alan won't stop at anything, but we've prepared too well for him to turn the tide now." She hung up the phone and stood alone in the dark, her gaze fixed on the Hawthorne and Beck building, which shone brightly in the night. Evelyn felt that this was no longer just a personal struggle. It was a battle for justice, for the dignity of ordinary people, for the truth that had long been buried in the darkness of power and greed. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the strength of her determination spreading through her heart. She knew that in just a few hours she would step out of the shadows, not as the invisible janitor they were familiar with, but as the woman who held the fate of an entire corporation in her hands. The day of judgment was approaching, and Evelyn was ready to face Alan Greaves and all his accomplices. When tomorrow came, they would all pay for their ruthless actions, and Evelyn would ensure that Hawthorne and Beck would change forever. And then, the day of reckoning arrived. That morning, the soft sunlight streamed through the large windows of the Hawthorne and Beck building, casting a shimmering, ironic beauty on a day that would witness historic upheaval. Evelyn entered the building early, her heart racing but her face calm as usual. She still wore her familiar janitor's uniform, deliberately walking past those preparing for the important shareholder meeting. None of them looked at her, because to them, Evelyn was nothing more than an invisible figure in the glamorous world of power and money. In the large conference room on the top floor, Alan Greaves and the senior executives were already seated around the long, glossy wooden table. Alan sat at the highest seat, his usual confident and arrogant posture, his eyes scanning the shareholders as he spoke with authority. "Today, we will continue our path to success. Those who can't keep up with the pace of this company will, of course, be eliminated. This is the rule of the game." The room erupted in agreement from Alan's loyal executives, completely unaware that they were standing on the brink of collapse. Just then, the conference room door gently opened, and Evelyn walked in with a calm expression, holding a thick folder. At first, no one noticed her, because Evelyn had long been just another part of the familiar scenery, unnoticed by anyone. Alan glanced up briefly, his eyes flashing with annoyance and contempt. He coldly spoke. "Evelyn, this is not a place you're allowed to be. Please leave. We are in a meeting." Evelyn didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a few more steps, gently placed the folder on the table, and fixed a calm but determined gaze directly on Alan. Her voice rang out slowly, each word clear. "I know, Mr. Greaves, but today, I'm not here as a janitor." At that moment, every eye in the room turned toward Evelyn, and the murmurs gradually died down, replaced by an eerie silence, filled with curiosity and discomfort. Alan furrowed his brow, his voice tinged with frustration. "Then what are you here as? If you don't want to be fired right now, I suggest you leave immediately." Evelyn didn't flinch at the threat. She even moved closer to Alan, her gaze becoming so sharp that it momentarily caught him off guard. Evelyn opened the folder and presented a document clearly labeled, "Confirmation of the largest shareholder of Hawthorne and Beck." "I'm here as the largest shareholder of Hawthorne and Beck," Evelyn said calmly, her voice echoing through the room. Immediately, Alan froze, his expression shifting from anger to confusion, and then to complete pallor. The room was plunged into absolute silence, and the other executives stared at Evelyn, shocked and stunned. No one could have imagined that the woman before them, the one they had so often dismissed and ignored, was the one holding the greatest power. Alan struggled to regain his composure, forcing a strained laugh. "What are you talking about? What kind of joke is this?" But Evelyn remained unfazed. She continued, her voice still calm, but now sharper than ever. "There's no joke here, Mr. Greaves. I've been silently observing everything in this company for years, witnessing all the wrongdoings you and your associates have committed. I've gathered all the evidence, and today I'm here to expose it all." Evelyn flipped through the pages of the document, placing before each shareholder a series of detailed evidence: the shady financial dealings, the wrongful contracts, the unjustified firings, and the abuse of power by Alan and his leadership team. At that moment, Alan was truly panicked, his hands trembling as he picked up one of the documents, unable to speak a word. The other shareholders began to whisper, their gazes shifting from doubt to outrage. They started firing off questions, their eyes now filled with suspicion and disappointment as they looked at Alan. Alan tried to speak up, but his voice had lost all the confidence and authority it once had. "You can't. This is definitely a plot against me. This is all a lie." But Evelyn took another step forward, her voice now strong and clear. "There's no plot, Mr. Greaves. This is the truth, and you can't escape responsibility any longer. I demand the board immediately vote to remove Alan Greaves from the position of CEO of Hawthorne and Beck." The room erupted in shock at Evelyn's declaration. Alan staggered to his feet, his eyes for the first time showing sheer terror. Evelyn stood there, calm and strong, looking directly at Alan, the man who had once looked down on and belittled her without mercy. In that moment, Evelyn knew that her fight had truly begun, and she was no longer invisible. From this moment on, Evelyn would be the one to forever change the history of Hawthorne and Beck, making Alan Greaves and all his co-conspirators face consequences they never thought possible. In the moment when the room fell into absolute silence after Evelyn made her demand to vote to remove Alan, the atmosphere became suffocatingly tense. Alan stood frozen, his face pale with shock, his eyes darting around as if searching for any sign that this was just a nightmare. The other shareholders, one by one, turned their curious and increasingly furious gazes toward Alan, as though for the first time they were truly seeing the true nature of the leader they had once trusted. At that moment, Evelyn calmly picked up a thick folder, filled with the documents she had meticulously gathered over months. She slammed the folder onto the table, the sharp sound echoing in the otherwise quiet room like a final judgment being delivered to Alan. Evelyn's voice rose, calm yet incredibly powerful, each word clear like a sharp knife. In this file is the full evidence of the crimes that Mr. Alan Greaves has deliberately hidden for all this time. I have full reports of forged financial statements, fraudulent contracts, unjustified employee firings to consolidate personal power, and cases of harassment and bullying that he has purposefully concealed. All of this is clearly documented and complete. Evelyn's words shook the entire boardroom like an earthquake. Alan's mouth hung open, trying to protest, but his voice choked, unable to form a coherent sentence. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. His face filled with horror as he saw the detailed evidence. Every misappropriated amount marked in red, every forged signature circled and fully noted. "It's impossible. You can't have these," Alan stammered, desperately trying to speak through his shock. Evelyn looked straight at Alan, her gaze sharp and decisive, her voice rising once again, this time even more forceful and determined. "Mr. Greaves, you have exploited the power and trust of this entire company for years. You have belittled the value of your employees, disrespected their dignity, and most of all, you've betrayed the very basic ethical principles of a leader. Today, on behalf of all the employees at Hawthorne and Beck, I am here to announce your removal from the CEO position, and I request the board to officially approve this decision." As soon as Evelyn finished speaking, the room erupted into whispers and furious discussions. The shareholders passed around the irrefutable evidence. A longtime shareholder, once a staunch supporter of Alan, stood up, now speaking with anger. "Mr. Greaves, you have deceived us all this time. We trusted you, but you have betrayed that trust with these disgraceful actions." Alan, now completely losing the authority he once held, gripped the edge of the table as if he could no longer stand. His eyes were fixed on Evelyn, full of resentment but also helplessness. His voice shook as he tried to threaten her one last time. "You think you can do this? You're just a janitor, nothing more." Evelyn didn't waver in the face of his despair. She answered Alan calmly, but with a chilling finality. "It is your contempt for people like me that has led to your downfall. I am not standing here as a janitor. I stand here as the largest shareholder of Hawthorne and Beck, and today I am exercising my rightful authority." Evelyn's voice rang out clearly and decisively, filling the entire room, causing Alan to crumble in utter despair. The other shareholders stood up one by one, clearly showing their disapproval of Alan, and immediately demanding a vote. In that moment, Alan realized that the power he had once thought was absolute had shattered in front of the very woman he had once so ruthlessly ignored. Evelyn remained standing, silent but unshakable, as though all the years of suffering had forged in her an indomitable strength. At that moment, Evelyn knew that her declaration had officially shaken the very foundation of the company. Alan Greaves, the man who once thought he was an untouchable king, had now been overthrown by the very evidence he once believed could never be held against him. And for Evelyn, this was only the beginning. Justice had finally arrived, and no one, especially not Alan, could stop it now. The moment Evelyn finished speaking, Alan Greaves knew his world had completely unraveled. Standing before the disappointed and angry gazes of the board of directors, Alan struggled desperately. His hand trembled as he raised it, his voice no longer commanding but weak and stammering. All of this is a lie. You're making a huge mistake. She's deceiving you." But Alan's words no longer held any power. The clear evidence, with each number, each signature, each forged report, was undeniable. The board had no more doubts. An elderly shareholder stood up, looking at Alan with a stern and deeply disappointed expression, and spoke with firm resolve. "Mr. Greaves, all this evidence is crystal clear. We trusted you, but you've abused that trust for personal gain. We have no choice but to agree with the decision to remove you immediately." Alan's eyes scanned the room, desperately searching for any sign of sympathy. But everyone who had once stood by him, those leaders who had considered Alan their rock, now turned their backs, avoiding his pleading gaze. Alan cried out one last time, his voice bitter and filled with rage. "You'll regret this decision. I've made this company millions of dollars. You can't do this to me." But no one responded. A chilling silence engulfed the room, like a final sentence passed on Alan. A board member stood up, calmly picked up the phone, and requested security to come to the meeting room. Alan panicked when he realized this, rushing toward Evelyn with an expression full of hatred. "You'll pay for this. You think you've won? I won't let you get away with this." Immediately, 2 security officers entered the room and quickly restrained Alan before he could do anything. Alan thrashed helplessly, shouting, "Let go of me. I'm the CEO of this company. You have no right to treat me like this." But his words were meaningless now. Alan was escorted out amidst the astonished and curious gazes of the entire company, those who had just witnessed the complete downfall of a man they once thought untouchable. The image of Alan walking away in humiliation, his shoulders shaking, his face dazed, would be etched in the memories of all those present that day. The news of Alan Greaves' dismissal spread rapidly throughout the company like a violent tsunami. Employees stopped in the hallways, exchanging shocked looks and endless questions. No one could believe that Alan, the man who had controlled the company through fear, had met such a disgraceful end. In the conference room, Evelyn stood there, her gaze calm and determined. While she had completed the hardest task, defeating Alan and exposing the truth, Evelyn knew that the battle was not yet over. She looked around at the remaining shareholders, her voice slow but full of power. "Today marks the first day of change at Hawthorne and Beck. We will no longer allow such misconduct to happen again. It's time to rebuild this company based on transparency, fairness, and respect for all employees." The shareholders were silent, looking at Evelyn with respect and agreement. They understood that Evelyn had not only brought the evidence of Alan's downfall, but also a new opportunity for the company to revive itself from values that had long been forgotten. As Alan was escorted out of the building under strict security, Evelyn walked toward the large window, looking down at the scene below. She felt as if a tremendous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Alan Greaves, the man who once proclaimed himself the king of power at Hawthorne and Beck, was now officially a tragic failure, paying the price for all his selfish and ruthless actions. But Evelyn did not feel any sense of triumph or joy at Alan's downfall. Instead, she felt more deeply than ever the immense responsibility that now lay on her shoulders. From this moment forward, Evelyn knew that she would have to lead Hawthorne and Beck into a new chapter. A place where fairness and integrity were no longer abstract concepts, but the core foundation for the company's future. Alan Greaves had officially fallen, and Evelyn, the woman who had once been invisible in the eyes of everyone, had now stepped up to become a powerful symbol of justice and the change that Hawthorne and Beck needed more than ever. As the doors of Hawthorne and Beck closed behind Alan, marking the end of a dark era, Evelyn understood that her responsibility was now greater than ever. The fall of Alan Greaves was not just her personal victory, but a pivotal moment for the company's reconstruction, to restore the values that had been lost to power and blind ambition. Immediately after Alan's departure, Evelyn called for a company-wide meeting. Standing before hundreds of curious, anxious, yet hopeful eyes, Evelyn showed no signs of authority or arrogance. Instead, she stepped up to the podium simply and sincerely, her warm voice resonating clearly throughout the room. From today, Hawthorne and Beck will begin a new chapter. The days of living in fear and injustice are officially over. We all deserve to work in an environment where everyone is respected and recognized. Her words were met with a resounding round of applause, as the eyes that had once been accustomed to injustice and oppression now sparkled with hope and trust for the first time. From the janitor Maria to the office staff who had been looked down upon, everyone looked at Evelyn with gratitude, as if they could finally breathe easy after years of suffering. Immediately, Evelyn began taking decisive actions to stabilize the company. She immediately restructured the organization, starting by improving the lives of those who had been forgotten, the laborers. Evelyn personally directed a significant pay raise for the janitors, security staff, and all those who had always been undervalued under Alan's regime. These workers, who had long been familiar with injustice, were so moved that many of them were brought to tears in their offices when they received the announcement of these changes from Evelyn. But Evelyn didn't stop there. She quickly implemented a set of strict ethical policies, demanding absolute transparency from all levels of management. All transactions, contracts, and key decisions were to be disclosed clearly to all employees. She established an independent committee to oversee human resources issues, ensuring that no one could abuse their power, and that incidents like those caused by Alan would never happen again. Under Evelyn's leadership, the company culture, once toxic and fraught with tension, quickly changed. The work atmosphere became more open, and every employee felt that their voice was heard and respected. Those who had been forgotten, sidelined, could now confidently stand up, contributing ideas to the company they cherished. Hawthorne and Beck's clients and business partners also quickly recognized the positive changes. Contracts became more transparent and trustworthy, and trust began to return as they saw that the company was now led by an ethical leader who valued integrity over short-term profits. The company regained its reputation swiftly in the market, not only because of new policies, but also because of the image of its new leader. Evelyn, the woman once considered invisible, now a symbol of powerful rebirth and fairness. Evelyn also directly participated in community activities, encouraging the company to support charitable programs and invest in social initiatives aimed at improving the local community's lives. She wanted Hawthorne and Beck not only to be economically strong, but also a place that nurtured human values and contributed to building a fairer society. As time passed, the changes Evelyn brought became increasingly evident. The company not only recovered, but thrived more than ever. Every employee, regardless of their position, began working with renewed passion and hope. Those who had once witnessed Alan's coldness and selfishness were now inspired by Evelyn's determination, integrity, and compassion. For Evelyn, every day served as a reminder that her fight was not just to overthrow Alan, but to prove that kindness, integrity, and unity always have a place in the cold, competitive business world. Under Evelyn's leadership, Hawthorne and Beck had begun a miraculous rebirth, regaining the trust of employees, clients, and public opinion, standing as a powerful testament to the victory of courage and determination. And more than anyone, Evelyn understood that her journey had only just begun. But she was ready to lead the company toward a brighter future, where everyone was treated fairly, respected, and truly given the opportunity to grow. Hawthorne and Beck was now ready to enter a new era under Evelyn's leadership, the leader who had once been invisible, but now had become the true soul of the company's revival. From the moment Evelyn stepped into the leadership role of the Hawthorne and Beck revival, the image of the small woman who once quietly cleaned the hallways quickly became a living symbol of courage and integrity, spreading far beyond the walls of the building. Not only the company's employees, but also people outside, anyone who heard Evelyn's story felt deeply inspired. Previously, Evelyn had been known as an invisible shadow in the eyes of those around her, a janitor silently working amid the indifferent stares of the leadership. But now, every time Evelyn walked down the gleaming halls of the company, employees greeted her with smiles, respect, and admiration. Their eyes no longer saw the woman who had once been looked down upon. Instead, they saw a compassionate leader who had bravely stood up against injustice, bringing real change for everyone. Evelyn's story quickly spread beyond the company, becoming a topic of widespread media and public interest. Articles about her spread rapidly, calling Evelyn the small woman who shook a giant corporation, and a new symbol of the hidden strength of ordinary people. Evelyn was not accustomed to such attention, but she understood that her story was much more profound than a personal success. It carried a powerful message that anyone could change the world if they dared to fight and maintain integrity. In interviews with the media, Evelyn always humbly and calmly emphasized that this victory was not hers alone. It was the victory of patience, kindness, and the collective strength of those who had been overlooked but never gave up believing in what was right. One time, when a reporter asked her what had given her the courage to stand up against such a powerful force like Alan Greaves, Evelyn smiled gently and answered sincerely, "I never thought of myself as a hero. I just believe that when faced with injustice, silence is never the right choice. True strength doesn't come from power or position, but from patience, courage, and kindness towards those around us." Her honest words further deepened the public's respect for Evelyn, and she became a symbol of inspiration for those fighting for justice, for those who had once felt powerless and invisible in society. Hawthorne and Beck, once infamous for its toxic culture, had now become a symbol of fairness and transparency, all thanks to Evelyn's steadfast leadership. Alan Greaves, the man who once instilled fear and wielded power with ruthlessness, was now merely a memory, a reminder of the consequences when power exceeds the limits of morality. The news of his investigation and accountability before the law further reinforced everyone's belief in justice. For Evelyn, the greatest success was not fame or personal power, but seeing her colleagues' faces brighten every day, living more meaningful and dignified lives. To them, Evelyn was not just a leader, she was a friend, a sister, and a role model to follow in life. One beautiful day, Evelyn stepped out of the Hawthorne and Beck building after a long day at work. She paused for a moment, looking up at the clear sky, feeling a peacefulness in her heart that she had not felt in a long time. Evelyn was no longer the invisible woman. She had stepped into the light, and her story was now a living testament to the fact that true power lies within each of us, if we dare to trust ourselves and stand up for what is right. She walked slowly, carrying pride and confidence, ready to begin a new, meaningful chapter in her life. And from that moment, Evelyn knew her journey would always serve as a powerful reminder to everyone. No matter how small we may seem, each of us can bring about great change, as long as we never give up on the power of courage, patience, and above all, integrity. Evelyn's story is not only a testament to the extraordinary power of patience and courage, but also a genuine reminder that anyone, no matter how small, can change the world if they dare to stand up for what is right. What about you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced similar stories of resilience and bravery? Please share with us in the comments. If you feel inspired by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to help spread more meaningful messages. Thank you, and see you in the next stories.